Hi, I hope you're enjoying the First Time Storytelling Summit and getting a lot of valuable information and taking notes and feeling really motivated about telling your story. My name is Ronit Plank, and I am a former actress who worked in New York and LA. And then I became a writer, and I write articles and memoir essays and short fiction. And I have a book coming out in May called When She Comes Back. It's a memoir about my mom leaving to follow a guru when I was young. And I have a short story collection getting published in 2022, which just won a prize that I'm pretty excited about. I am the host and producer of the podcast, And Then Everything Changed, which features guest interviews with people about the pivotal moments in their life and the decisions that they feel define them. And every time I interview a guest, I'm looking for what their story is. Not just what happened to them and the facts and the details and the information, but what ties it all together. And that, for me, is what makes a story. Well, lots of things make a story. And stories have been used between human beings since human beings existed. Whether people use tools or artwork or cave drawings or body language or even simple language to communicate, they were communicating to share information, sometimes for protection, sometimes for survival, sometimes to share happiness or grief. But really at the heart of stories is connection. And when someone shares a story and the story resonates with you, it kind of lights a path in the darkness for all of us to see. And it sort of is like the invisible connective tissue between all people, as far as I'm concerned. So why should you tell a story when you're a guest on a podcast or when you're a host of a podcast? Well, there are the basic details that you share when you come onto a podcast. You know, what you do, what your mission is perhaps, or why you're doing the podcast if you're the host. But who are you? And how do you get your listener to understand what makes you tick and what's important to you? One of the most powerful ways to communicate who you are is by sharing anecdotes from your life and stories of things that are important to you. This also helps the listener figure out what's important to you, who means something to you, and what messages carry you through your life and what you're seeking in your life. And when a listener can hear this from you and get a sense of what means something to you, they feel closer to you and they feel more connected to you, and their empathy kind of gets charged up. They can kind of reach out across the sound waves and sort of feel who you are, and you are more familiar to them. And so story is more than information, and story is more than just a couple of collections of things that happened. Story is the beginning of an experience from point A, and then what happened on the way to point B. And stories draw your listener in, they draw your audience in, they make them stop what they're doing if you tell them right and you take your time and you really try to find meaningful details. And it prevents the listener from scrolling past the podcast that you're guesting on or that you're hosting and staying around to find out more about you. So when you convey who you are through story, you are sort of grabbing a piece of attention that you deserve and letting the listener know that their time is worth it, that your time is worth it and their time is worth it. So it's kind of like a two-way street. You want to let listeners understand who you are without forcing it down their throat. You don't want to say, you know, I started this company because people are really important to me, or I started this podcast because I really think that people need to know who I am. That is not going to be as appealing or as connected as telling a story about your life growing up and what was an important moment for you that shaped you. What made you realize that you needed to connect with people? What made you realize what was important to you? Those are the stories that listeners really like. And you can tell them in a funny way. These don't all have to be serious. I mean, sometimes my podcast guests, we talk about pretty serious things, but there's room for humor everywhere, and there's a time and a place. And so even things that are kind of serious can be conveyed in a kind of entertaining way. So I would first of all say that, as I mentioned before, stories light the path and make people feel less alone, that stories help connect people. And so that, even if you don't know someone well, you can learn a little bit about their family or how they were raised. And for me, when I learn a little bit of details about where someone is coming from or what their experience is, I already feel closer to them. I feel like, right, the human being inside of me, my spirit or my soul, whatever you want to call it, recognizes the humanity in you. And so I'm already closer to you than someone whose story I don't know. I hope that makes sense. The other thing I would really encourage you to do is get a sense of what shape the story you're telling is taking and what you want it to convey. You can, in advance, kind of work out in your mind what it is you're trying to convey, as I mentioned before. So you can draw your listener in by setting them up with a little suspense or a little backstory. And the backstory is also going to draw them in, because if they know where you grew up, or that you're one of 6 kids, or maybe that you had no siblings but you always wanted siblings, or that your parent was ill, or that you never knew your grandparents, all those details are really important and help them understand who you are and help to build connection. And I can't stress enough how important connection is when you're trying to communicate, right? So chances are, if you're podcasting, whether you're running a show or you're going to be a guest, you're trying to communicate something. And whether it's as straightforward as a product or a service, or whether it's a little bit more nuanced, you want to connect with your listener. And that is why stories are important, and they're important for your life too. So I hope that this was helpful for you. I hope you feel encouraged, and I hope you feel motivated to start collecting your stories and thinking about them and remembering that your experience matters. Thank you.